What would you do if the system let your brother's killers walk free? Maya Chin spent 3 years preparing her answer. And when she finally walked through those school gates, she wasn't there to make friends. She was there for war. Welcome to Voice of Granny. While you are here, please hit the subscribe button and comment your view on the story and where you're watching from. Sometimes life puts you exactly where you need to be, even when it feels like the last place you want to go. That's how Maya Chin felt on her first day at Riverside Academy in Seattle. She was 17 years old, standing in front of those tall iron gates, looking up at a school that cost more per year than most families made in income. Maya wasn't like the other students here. She didn't arrive in a fancy car. She didn't have designer clothes or the latest phone. She had a scholarship, a worn backpack, and something else, something nobody could see. She had a purpose. For 2 weeks, Maya kept her head down. She went to classes, ate lunch alone, and watched. Always watching. The other students didn't know what to make of her. This quiet girl from San Francisco, with her simple clothes and serious eyes. She didn't try to fit in. She didn't seem to care what anyone thought of her. But there was one person who definitely noticed her. His name was Brandon Cooper. Brandon was 18 years old, captain of the wrestling team, and his father was the city's mayor. At Riverside Academy, Brandon ruled like a king. He had done it for years, choosing targets, breaking them down, making sure everyone knew their place. And when he saw Maya, this new girl who didn't seem impressed by him at all, he decided she would be his next project. It started small. Comments in the hallway. Whispers loud enough for her to hear. Brandon and his friends would laugh as she walked past, making jokes about her clothes, her background, where she came from. But Maya never reacted. She would just look at him with these calm, steady eyes, like she was studying something under a microscope. It drove Brandon crazy. Then one day in the cafeteria, Brandon decided to escalate things. He walked up to Maya's table where she sat alone, eating her lunch. His friends followed behind him, grinning, already excited about whatever was going to happen. "Hey, scholarship girl," Brandon said loud enough for everyone to hear. "I think it's time someone taught you about respect." The cafeteria got quiet. 300 students watching. This was the moment Brandon lived for. Public humiliation, total control. He reached for Maya's arm, planning to twist it behind her back. Just a little pain, just enough to make his point. But what happened next, nobody expected. In less than 5 seconds, Brandon was on the floor. Not Maya. Brandon. He was screaming, clutching his wrist, his face twisted in pain. The sound of his bone being forced back echoed through that cafeteria like a gunshot. Students froze. Some gasped. Others pulled out their phones. Maya stood over him, calm as still water. She adjusted her backpack on her shoulder like nothing unusual had happened. "Someone should call the nurse," she said quietly. Her voice wasn't angry. It wasn't satisfied. It was just cold. Matter of fact. And that's what scared people the most. "What did you do?" Brandon gasped from the floor. "You broke my wrist." "Basic self-defense," Maya replied, checking her watch. "Pressure on specific points, controlled rotation. Nothing permanent if you don't make it worse." The way she said it, so technical, so precise, made everyone realize this wasn't luck. This girl had training. Real training. Principal Harrison came rushing through the crowd. He was a thin man with nervous eyes, and his first instinct was to protect Brandon. After all, this was the mayor's son. "She attacked me," Brandon shouted, pointing at Maya with his good hand. "She broke my wrist for no reason." Maya didn't say anything at first. She just reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone. "Actually," she said calmly, "I recorded everything. Would you like to see?" The color drained from Brandon's face. For the past 15 minutes, he had been saying terrible things to her. Racist comments. Threats. All building up to the moment he tried to hurt her. And she had recorded every single word. That's illegal," Brandon stammered. "You can't record people without permission." "Washington is a one-party consent state," Maya said. "Anyone involved in a conversation can legally record it." I checked. Principal Harrison looked uncomfortable. This wasn't in any handbook he knew. Maya put her phone away and started walking toward the exit. As she passed Brandon's friends, the same ones who had been laughing at her for 2 weeks, she paused. "For anyone wondering," she said loud enough for the whole cafeteria to hear, "I didn't come to Riverside Academy to make friends. I came here for a very specific reason. And you just gave me exactly what I needed." Her eyes met Brandon's for just a moment. "Thanks for your cooperation," she said. Then she walked out, leaving 300 students in complete silence. Brandon finally got to his feet with help from his friends. But when he looked around for support, for the usual admiration and fear he was used to, he found something different. He found doubt, questions in people's eyes. Phone still recording. For the first time in his life, Brandon Cooper realized he might have picked on the wrong person. What Brandon didn't know, what nobody at Riverside Academy knew, was that Maya Chen hadn't stumbled into this confrontation. She had planned it, every single detail. Because 3 years ago, something terrible had happened. Something that changed Maya's life forever. And breaking Brandon's wrist? That was just the beginning. Let me tell you about Daniel Chen. He was Maya's older brother, and if you had met him, you would have loved him. Everybody did. Daniel was 19 years old, brilliant, kind, with dreams so big they couldn't fit in any one room. He wanted to be a doctor. Not just any doctor. He wanted to work in communities that needed help the most. He used to tell Maya, "The world has enough people chasing money. Someone's got to chase justice instead." 3 years ago, Daniel earned a scholarship to Riverside Academy. The Chen family celebrated like they had won the lottery. Their son, going to one of the best schools in Seattle. It felt like a miracle. At first, Daniel's letters home were full of excitement. He wrote about his classes, his teachers, the beautiful campus. But slowly, over the months, the tone changed. He started mentioning misunderstandings with other students. Small incidents. Comments about where he came from, about his family's income, about whether he really belonged there. Maya was 14 at the time. She didn't understand why her brother's words were getting sadder. The last letter Daniel sent arrived 2 weeks before he died. "Maya," he wrote, "promise me something. No matter what happens to me, never let people make you feel small just because they have money and you don't. The truth always matters. Sometimes it just needs someone brave enough to tell it." Maya kept that letter. She still has it. Daniel died at a party at Brandon Cooper's house. The official story was simple. Daniel had too much to drink, went out on the second-floor balcony, lost his balance, and fell. A tragic accident. Case closed. But Maya's family never believed it. Daniel didn't drink. He was disciplined, focused, always careful. And when they got his clothes back from the police, Maya's mother noticed something. Bruises on Daniel's arms, tears in his shirt that looked like someone had grabbed him. "We should investigate this further," Maya's father said to the detective. The detective was sympathetic but firm. "Mr. Chen, I understand you're grieving, but sometimes accidents are just accidents. The Cooper family has cooperated fully. All the witnesses gave statements. There's nothing suspicious here." What the Chen family didn't know at the time was that the detective was a close friend of Mayor Cooper. That the investigator who processed the evidence had received a generous donation to his retirement fund. That key pieces of evidence, Daniel's phone, security footage from that night, had mysteriously disappeared. The case was closed within 3 weeks. The news barely covered it. Just another tragic accident. Nothing to see here. But Maya saw everything. She was 14 years old, and she saw how power worked. How money could buy silence. How the truth could be buried when the right people wanted it buried. At Daniel's funeral, Maya made a promise. Standing over her brother's grave, tears streaming down her face, she whispered, "I'll find out what really happened. I promise you, Daniel. I'll make them tell the truth." For the next 3 years, Maya transformed herself. She stopped being a regular teenager. She became something else, something focused and determined in a way that scared even her parents sometimes. She studied martial arts 6 days a week. Not the flashy kind you see in movies, but real self-defense. The kind that teaches you exactly how to protect yourself against someone bigger and stronger. She learned the law. Every statute, every loophole, every right she had as a citizen. She studied recordings, laws, evidence procedures, how investigations really worked. She got perfect grades. Not because she loved school, but because she needed that scholarship to Riverside Academy. She needed to get inside that world. The world that had killed her brother. And she investigated. Late at night, on her laptop, Maya dug into everything she could find about Riverside Academy. She found social media posts from the night Daniel died. Posts that had been deleted, but that she managed to recover. Photos showing Daniel looking uncomfortable, surrounded by students. Videos of Brandon and his friends mocking Daniel, forcing drinks into his hand. She found patterns too. Other students, mostly Black and Latino kids like Daniel, who had transferred out of Riverside suddenly. Disciplinary issues, the records said. But when Maya contacted these families, they told different stories. Stories about bullying, threats, incidents that were covered up or ignored. Riverside Academy wasn't just a school. It was a system that protected certain students while grinding down others. Maya spent 3 years preparing for this. 3 years learning, training, planning. Her parents worried about her. "Maya, you're still so young," her mother would say. "You should be living your life, not obsessing over the past." But Maya couldn't let it go. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Daniel's face. She heard his voice from that last letter. The truth always matters. When Maya finally earned her scholarship to Riverside Academy, her parents were conflicted. They were proud, of course, but they were also afraid. "Are you sure about this?" her father asked the night before her first day. Maya hugged him. "I have to do this, Dad. For Daniel." What her parents didn't know, what nobody knew, was that Maya wasn't going to Riverside Academy alone. Before she started school, she had contacted the FBI with everything she had discovered. 3 years of evidence, patterns of discrimination, suspicious deaths and transfers, corruption that reached from the school all the way to the mayor's office. The FBI was interested. Very interested. Agent Rebecca Torres met with Maya in person. "This is dangerous," she said. "You'd be going in as an informant. If anyone finds out." "They won't," Maya said quietly. "I've been preparing for this for 3 years. I know exactly what I need to do." So Maya Chin walked through those gates of Riverside Academy with a secret. She was there to get justice for Daniel, and for every other student who had been hurt by people who thought they were untouchable. Brandon Cooper had no idea what was coming. After that day in the cafeteria, everything changed at Riverside Academy. But not in the way Brandon expected. Brandon thought the story would be about how some new girl attacked him. He thought his father would make a few phone calls, pull a few strings, and Maya would disappear by the end of the week. That's how things had always worked in his world. But instead, the hallways were buzzing with a different story. Students were whispering about the video Maya had recorded. About the things Brandon had said before he tried to hurt her. Racial slurs. Threats. All captured in high definition. "I heard what he called her," Jessica Martinez said to a group of friends near the lockers. "And he threatened to hurt her just for existing. That's messed up." Brandon's wrist was in a splint, but his wounded pride hurt worse than any broken bone. On Thursday morning, Brandon gathered his closest friends in the parking lot before school. His inner circle, Jake, the quarterback, Marcus, the lacrosse captain, and David, whose family owned half the real estate in Seattle. "Listen," Brandon said, his voice tight with anger. "This girl needs to learn a lesson. My dad already talked to Principal Harrison. She'll be expelled by Friday." "Dude, I don't know," Jake said nervously. "She recorded you saying some pretty bad stuff." Brandon's eyes flashed. "It doesn't matter what she recorded. My dad is the mayor. The Chun family are nobodies from San Francisco who came here on charity. Who do you think the school is going to protect?" What Brandon didn't notice was Maya, standing near enough to hear every word. Her phone was in her jacket pocket, recording as always. Brandon's mistake was thinking he was fighting a scared teenage girl. He didn't understand that Maya had spent 3 years studying people like him. She knew exactly how they thought, how they acted, what they would do when threatened. She was always 3 steps ahead. That afternoon, Brandon went to Principal Harrison's office with his parents. Mayor Cooper wore an expensive suit and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Principal Harrison," the mayor said smoothly, "we need to discuss the Maya Chin situation. My son was violently attacked. We're considering pressing charges." Principal Harrison nodded nervously. "Of course, Mayor Cooper. We take violence very seriously." "Good," Brandon's mother added. She was a thin woman with sharp features and a sharper voice. "That girl is clearly disturbed. She doesn't belong here." They spent an hour discussing Maya's disciplinary issues. How she was a danger to other students. How her scholarship should be revoked. Principal Harrison took notes, promised action, assured them everything would be handled quietly. None of them knew that Maya's lawyer, yes, she had a lawyer, had already filed complaints with the State Education Board. Complaints backed by months of evidence showing patterns of discrimination at Riverside Academy. On Friday, Brandon made his big move. During lunch, he walked into the cafeteria with 5 friends and a printed document. He was smiling like he'd already won. Well, Brandon announced loudly. "Looks like some people are about to learn about consequences." He threw the paper onto Maya's table. It was a suspension notice, claiming she had shown violent behavior and threatened other students. My lawyer got a court order to review all your so-called evidence, Brandon continued, his voice dripping with satisfaction. Turns out, editing footage to make yourself look innocent is a federal crime. Who knew? Maya picked up the document calmly. She read it, then looked at Brandon with those steady, unreadable eyes. Are you sure you want to go down this road? She asked quietly. Oh, I'm very sure. Brandon laughed, gesturing to his friends. Girls like you need to learn that there are consequences when you mess with the wrong people. Girls like me, Maya repeated softly. She put the document in her backpack. And what kind of girl do you think I am, Brandon? Brandon leaned forward, his voice cruel. The kind from San Francisco who needs charity to be here. The kind who doesn't understand how things really work. The kind who thinks recording a few words will take down people who actually matter in this city. Maya nodded slowly, absorbing every word. Then, for the first time since arriving at Riverside Academy, she smiled. Not a friendly smile. Not a nervous smile. Something that made Brandon take an involuntary step back. Brandon, she said calmly, you just made the biggest mistake of your life. She stood up, shouldered her backpack, and walked toward the exit. As she passed Brandon, she paused. Oh, and that court order your lawyer got? It's going to be really useful when my lawyer files for a full federal investigation into patterns of racial discrimination and crime cover-ups at this school. Thanks for giving me exactly what I needed. Brandon stood frozen. Maya had said my lawyer, as casually as talking about having a dentist. Poor kids from San Francisco didn't have lawyers. Unless there was something about Maya Chun that he had completely, catastrophically misunderstood. As Maya disappeared down the hallway, Brandon noticed other students weren't looking at him the same way anymore. The fear and admiration he was used to had been replaced by something else. Curiosity. Questions. Doubt. That afternoon, Brandon tried to call the law firm his father had mentioned. But what he discovered made his blood run cold. The court order he thought was in his favor was actually being challenged by a civil rights law firm. A firm that had apparently been investigating Riverside Academy for months. Maya Chun wasn't playing defense. She was several moves ahead in a game Brandon didn't even know existed. And every arrogant move he made only gave her more ammunition for a war that was about to explode in ways more devastating than anyone at Riverside Academy could imagine. The quiet girl from San Francisco wasn't just standing up to a bully. She was taking down an entire system. And she was doing it for Daniel. Have you ever seen someone's whole world fall apart in a single moment? That's what happened to Brandon Cooper on Monday morning. He arrived at school with his confidence restored. Over the weekend, his father had assured him everything was handled. That girl doesn't understand who she's dealing with, Mayor Cooper had said. By tomorrow, this will all be over. But when Brandon walked through the front doors of Riverside Academy, he saw something that stopped him in his tracks. Maya was sitting in Principal Harrison's office, talking calmly with a man in a dark suit. Through the glass, Brandon could see them chatting like old friends. The man had an official-looking badge clipped to his belt. Who's that guy? Brandon asked Jake in the hallway. No idea, Jake replied, his voice nervous. But he showed up in a black car with government plates. And dude, he doesn't look friendly. When Maya finally left the office an hour later, she walked past Brandon like he didn't exist. But the man in the suit stopped right beside him. Brandon Cooper? He said in a voice that demanded attention. Brandon's throat went dry. Yeah, I'm Federal Agent James Wright from the Department of Justice. We'd like to talk to you and your father about some events that took place 3 years ago. Specifically, about a party at your residence on March 15th. The hallway seemed to tilt. March 15th. That was the night Daniel Chun died. The night Brandon's family had worked so hard to forget, to bury, to make disappear. I don't know what you're talking about, Brandon stammered. Agent Wright pulled out a small notebook. Interesting, because we have records showing you posted 47 photos from that party on your social media. Photos that were deleted 2 days after Daniel Chun's death. But you know how the internet works, right? Nothing really disappears. Brandon felt sick. If they had the photos, they probably had everything else too. The messages where he and his friends planned to teach that scholarship kid a lesson. The videos showing Daniel being forced to drink. The audio recordings of them mocking him. My father will want to speak to your supervisor, Brandon said, trying to sound authoritative, but failing miserably. Agent Wright smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Actually, your father spoke with my supervisor this morning. He's being very cooperative. Maybe you should consider the same approach. That's when Brandon realized the truth. This investigation hadn't started last week. It had been going on for months, maybe longer. And Maya Chun, the quiet girl he thought he could bully, had been working with the FBI the entire time. Later that afternoon, Maya sat in a coffee shop 3 blocks from school with Agent Rebecca Torres. Rebecca had become more than just Maya's handler. She was a friend, the older sister of a student who had transferred from Riverside Academy the year before after an incident with one of Brandon's friends. "This week's recordings are excellent," Rebecca said, reviewing files on her laptop. "Brandon completely incriminated himself. And Principal Harrison's attempts to cover it up are even better. We have enough for criminal and civil charges." Maya sipped her coffee. "What about Mayor Cooper?" "He broke down this morning," Rebecca said with satisfaction. "Confessed to everything. The meetings he organized to solve the Daniel Chin problem. Names, dates, amounts paid to investigators to look the other way. All recorded and documented." Maya nodded, but she didn't look satisfied. She never did. This had never been about revenge for her. It was about making sure no other family went through what hers had. "How many other families have we identified?" she asked. 14 confirmed cases in the last 5 years at Riverside Academy alone. Black and Latino students who were forced to transfer or expelled after confrontations with wealthy white students. All cases closed without proper investigation. Rebecca closed her laptop and looked at Maya seriously. "Are you sure you want to proceed with tomorrow's plan? Brandon's going to make one last desperate move. It could get ugly." "I'm counting on it," Maya said quietly. "I need him completely out of control, confessing everything in front of witnesses. There can be no doubt about who he really is." The next morning, Tuesday, Brandon arrived at school with 2 private security guards his father had hired. His strategy had changed. If he couldn't make Maya disappear quietly, he would destroy her publicly. During morning break, Brandon positioned himself in the center of the main courtyard where everyone gathered. He had a microphone. His security guards stood nearby. He was ready to expose Maya for what she really was. "Attention, everyone." Brandon's voice echoed across the courtyard. "The girl you all think is some kind of hero is actually a government spy. She came here specifically to destroy this school and your families." Students stopped and stared. Some looked confused. Others scared. "Kesha Williams isn't even her real name," Brandon continued, getting bolder. "She's a trained FBI informant who was planted here to spy on you. Every conversation you've had with her has been recorded and turned over to the government." Maya appeared at the edge of the crowd. She stood calmly, watching Brandon's public breakdown. When their eyes met, she simply nodded. "It's true," Brandon shouted, pointing at her. "Admit it. Tell everyone who you really are." Maya walked slowly through the crowd until she stood face to face with Brandon. The courtyard fell completely silent. Every student watching. Every phone recording. "Brandon," Maya said calmly, her voice carrying across the space, "you're right. I came here for a specific reason." She turned to address the entire crowd. "Tomorrow at 10 o'clock in the main auditorium, the whole truth will be revealed. About me. About Brandon. About this school. And about what really happened to my brother Daniel 3 years ago, when students like Brandon decided he didn't deserve to dream." The mention of Daniel's name made Brandon go pale. Some older students vaguely remembered hearing about a transfer student who had died, but they'd never made the connection. "You want to know who I really am?" Maya continued, her voice growing stronger. "Tomorrow you'll find out. But first, Brandon, why don't you tell everyone here about that party on March 15th? About what you did to my brother before he fell from your balcony." Brandon was completely frozen. The crowd around him began whispering frantically. Phones recording everywhere. That's when Brandon realized he had made the biggest mistake of his life. By forcing a public confrontation, he had given Maya exactly what she needed: an audience to expose everything his family had spent years covering up. When Brandon got home that afternoon, he found his father in his office on the phone with an expression of total panic. Mayor Cooper was desperately trying to contact anyone who could help control a situation that was completely out of his hands. For the first time, Brandon understood the truth. Maya Chun wasn't just a brave student standing up to a bully. She was something far more dangerous. Someone who had spent 3 years preparing to destroy not just him, but the entire system that protected him. And tomorrow, the whole world would know. Wednesday morning, 10 a.m. The Riverside Academy auditorium was packed beyond capacity. Students, teachers, parents, even local news reporters squeezed into every available seat. The air was thick with anticipation and tension. Brandon arrived with 3 lawyers hired by his father. He was still confident, still convinced he could turn this around. He sat in the front row, recording on his phone, ready to expose Maya as a fraud. "Everyone," Brandon announced loudly, "you're about to witness a professional liar being exposed." Then Maya walked onto the stage. She was alone. She wore a simple white t-shirt with a photo printed on the front. Her brother Daniel, smiling, full of life. Below the photo, words: "Justice for Daniel Chun, 2019 to 2022. The auditorium fell completely silent. "My name is Maya Chun," she began, her voice calm but strong. "And Brandon Cooper is right. I didn't come to Riverside Academy as an ordinary student." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Brandon smiled triumphantly. "I came here," Maya continued, "as part of a federal investigation into manslaughter, corruption, and systematic discrimination that has involved this school for more than 5 years." Brandon's smile died instantly. Maya pulled out a remote control, and a screen descended behind her. Images began to appear. Photos that Brandon thought had been deleted forever. Daniel Chun at a party, looking uncomfortable. Brandon and his friends surrounding him, laughing. Brandon forcing a drink into Daniel's hand. Daniel stumbling. Daniel being dragged toward the balcony. "No," Brandon shouted, jumping to his feet. "Those photos are fake. They've been edited." "Actually," Maya said calmly, "they were recovered by FBI forensic experts, along with these audio recordings." Brandon's voice filled the auditorium through the speakers. "This kid from San Francisco needs to learn his place. Let's teach him a lesson he won't forget." The crowd gasped. Some people covered their mouths. Others began crying. Brandon's face had gone completely white. "Daniel was murdered," Maya said, her voice carrying 3 years of grief. "And it was covered up using money and political influence." Official documents flashed on the screen. Bank transfers, meeting minutes, text messages between Mayor Cooper and corrupt investigators. A web of lies and payoffs, all exposed in brutal detail. Brandon tried to run, but federal agents had blocked every exit. Agent Wright appeared on stage beside Maya. "Brandon Cooper," he announced formally, "you are under arrest for manslaughter, evidence tampering, and obstruction of justice. My father will destroy all of you." Brandon screamed as handcuffs were placed on his wrists. "You have no idea what power you're up against." Maya looked directly at him, and for the first time, her voice carried emotion. Raw, painful emotion. "Your father is being arrested right now in his office downtown, along with Principal Harrison, 2 corrupt investigators, and the judge who dismissed Daniel's case." The auditorium erupted. Students shouted. Parents made frantic phone calls. Teachers looked at each other in shock. Cameras captured everything. Maya's eyes never left Brandon's face. "Daniel was brilliant," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "He was kind. He dreamed of becoming a doctor to help people who couldn't help themselves. You killed him. Not just his body. You killed every dream he had, every person he would have helped, every life he would have saved." Tears were streaming down her face now, but her voice remained steady. "You took him from his family, from his little sister who loved him more than anything in the world. And you thought you could get away with it because your father had money and power." Brandon was crying now too, but not from remorse. From fear. From the sudden, crushing realization that all his privilege couldn't save him anymore. "This doesn't end here," he sobbed as agents led him away. "My family has connections." "Had connections," Maya corrected gently. "Because every one of those connections is being investigated right now. 14 other families received justice today, Brandon. 14 families who lost their children to people like you." As Brandon disappeared through the auditorium doors, still crying and screaming about injustice, Maya turned to address the students one final time. "For 3 weeks, most of you watched him bully me. You stayed silent. Some of you even laughed. I understand why. He had power, and speaking up felt dangerous." She paused, making eye contact with faces throughout the crowd. "But Daniel taught me something important. He taught me that the truth always finds its way into the light. It just needs someone brave enough to open the door and let it shine." Maya held up the photo of Daniel she wore on her shirt. "I did this for my brother, but I also did it for every student who ever felt powerless in a place like this. For everyone who was ever told they didn't belong, that they weren't good enough, that they should know their place." Her voice grew stronger. "You all deserve better than a system that protects bullies and punishes victims. You deserve a school where everyone, regardless of their last name or bank account, is treated with equal dignity and respect. The auditorium was silent. Not the awkward silence from before, but something different. Something like understanding. Like shame. Like the beginning of change. Maya left the stage without another word. As she walked through the crowd, students parted to let her through. Some reached out to touch her arm, to say they were sorry, to thank her. She nodded to each of them, but kept walking. Outside, Agent Rebecca was waiting by a black car. "How do you feel?" Rebecca asked gently. Maya looked up at the sky. It was a beautiful day. The kind of day Daniel would have loved. "I feel," she said slowly, "like I can finally breathe again." 6 months later, the world looked very different. Brandon Cooper was serving 15 years in a federal prison. Without his privilege and protection, he discovered very quickly how the real world worked for people without power. Mayor Cooper resigned in disgrace. The family fortune was seized in lawsuits and federal fines. Their mansion, the one where Daniel died, was turned into a community center for underprivileged youth. Daniel Chin Community Center, the sign read. Riverside Academy was completely transformed. Principal Harrison was replaced by Dr. Patricia Johnson, a black educator who specialized in civil rights. The school implemented strict anti-discrimination programs. 14 students who had been forced out in previous years received compensation and invitations to return. Maya Chin became the youngest FBI special agent at age 18, specializing in investigating hate crimes in educational institutions. Her story inspired federal legislation requiring private schools to report patterns of discrimination. The Daniel Chin Act, they called it. The investigation uncovered a network of corruption spanning the entire state, resulting in arrests of 14 officials and a complete overhaul of how such cases were investigated. But the moment Maya treasured most came on the day Daniel's community center opened. She stood in front of a memorial wall displaying his photo, that same photo she had worn on her shirt, with a quote beneath it. "The truth always matters. It just needs someone brave enough to tell it." Daniel Chin. Maya placed her hand on the photo, and for the first time in 3 years she smiled, a real smile full of peace. "I kept my promise, Daniel," she whispered. "I kept my promise." Behind her, the community center was full of young people studying, laughing, dreaming their own dreams. Kids who looked like Daniel. Kids who came from families like the Chens. Kids who now had a chance because one sister refused to let her brother's death be in vain. That's the real power of justice, you see. It's not just about punishing the guilty. It's about creating a world where the next Daniel Chin doesn't have to die. Where the next Maya Chin doesn't have to spend 3 years of her childhood preparing for war. It's about making sure that everyone, regardless of where they come from or what they look like, has the right to dream without fear. And sometimes, just sometimes, that justice comes from the most unexpected places. From a quiet girl with determined eyes who loved her brother enough to take on an entire system. Maya proved that true strength doesn't come from money or power or fear. It comes from love, from courage, from refusing to give up on what's right, no matter how impossible it seems. And that's a lesson worth remembering. The end.